Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Last Goodbye. Rain pounded against the chapel windows as Damon Thorne stood beside his mother's casket. At 42, Damon had built his life on certainty and control. Standing at 6'2" with steel-gray eyes that rarely revealed emotion, he transformed his father's modest security firm into Thorne Defense Solutions, a company that provided cutting-edge security systems to government facilities. His reputation for brutal efficiency and uncompromising standards had earned him both respect and fear in the industry. Eleanor Thorne had been his anchor, the woman who raised him alone after his father's mysterious disappearance when Damon was just 10. She never remarried, dedicating her life to her only child. In her final years, Eleanor had suffered from early-onset dementia, her lucid moments becoming increasingly rare. "She looks peaceful," whispered Vivian, his wife of 8 years, slipping her hand into his. At 36, Vivian remained striking, olive skin, dark hair cut in a sleek bob, and eyes that seemed to shift between green and amber, depending on the light. They'd met at a charity auction where Vivian had been working as an event coordinator. Her intelligence and quiet confidence had drawn Damon to her immediately. "She wasn't peaceful at the end," Damon replied, his voice low. "The last time I visited, she grabbed my arm so hard it bruised. She was terrified of something." Vivian squeezed his hand. "The dementia. The doctors explained how it can cause paranoia." Damon nodded, but something nagged at him. His mother's fear had seemed too specific, too focused. Even in her confusion, Eleanor Thorne had always been trying to tell him something. The funeral reception was held at Damon's childhood home, a spacious colonial in the Virginia suburbs that Eleanor had refused to leave despite Damon's offers to move her closer to him. Guests moved through the house, offering condolences that felt hollow to Damon's ears. "You holding up okay?" asked Levi West, approaching with 2 glasses of bourbon. Levi had been Damon's right hand at Thorne Defense for 15 years, having served together in Army intelligence before entering the private sector. Where Damon was coldly analytical, Levi was intuitive and personable, the perfect counterbalance. "I'm fine," Damon replied, accepting the drink. "Vivian mentioned you're staying an extra day to handle the estate." Damon nodded. "There's a meeting with the attorney tomorrow. Some paperwork that needs my signature." "Take all the time you need," Levi said, clapping him on the shoulder. "The Belmont contract is under control." As the reception wound down, Damon noticed Vivian checking her phone frequently, a slight frown creasing her forehead. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Just work," she replied quickly. "The Wellington fundraiser is in 2 weeks, and nothing's going according to plan." Vivian had started her own event planning business 3 years ago, specializing in high-profile political fundraisers. "You should head back to D.C. tonight," Damon suggested. "I'll wrap things up here tomorrow and be home by evening." Relief flickered across Vivian's face. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. There's no reason for both of us to be away from work." After Vivian and the last of the guests departed, Damon walked through his mother's house, memories surfacing with each room. In her study, he found himself drawn to the antique desk where she used to write letters, actual handwritten letters to friends and family. On impulse, he opened the top drawer. Inside was a sealed envelope with his name written in his mother's unmistakable handwriting. The date on the envelope was just 3 weeks earlier, during what her caretaker had described as an unusually lucid day. Damon's heart pounded as he broke the seal and unfolded the letter. "My darling son, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I've failed to tell you this in person. My mind betrays me most days, but today is clear, and I must warn you while I can. Don't trust your wife. She's not who you think she is. I've seen things, Damon. When you brought her to visit last Christmas, I caught her going through your father's old papers in the attic. When I asked what she was looking for, the look in her eyes, it was the same look I saw in the men who came asking questions after your father disappeared. I know this sounds like the ravings of an old woman, but please, if you've ever trusted me, investigate. Be careful. There are files hidden behind the loose brick in the basement, the one your father showed you as a boy. I love you. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you better. Mom. Damon read the letter 3 times, his mind racing. His mother's dementia had produced all sorts of delusions, but this was written during a lucid period. And she mentioned the loose brick, a hiding spot only he and his parents had known about. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in his pocket. Then he headed for the basement. Chapter 2: Hidden Truths. The basement air was thick with dampness as Damon ran his fingers along the old brick wall. The hiding spot had been a game when he was a child, his father's secret vault, where they'd leave messages for each other. He found the loose brick easily, as if his fingers remembered what his mind had nearly forgotten. Behind it was a small metal box, coated in decades of dust. Inside were several microfiche slides and a handwritten note from his father dated just days before his disappearance. Damon, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. What I've discovered puts us all at risk. Trust no one outside our family. The people involved will stop at nothing. The microfiche contains evidence. I'm meeting with a federal prosecutor tomorrow. If I don't return, take this to Agent Walsh at the FBI field office on your 21st birthday. Not before. It's too dangerous. I love you, son. Stay strong. Damon stared at the note, a hurricane of emotions breaking through his carefully constructed walls. His father hadn't abandoned them. He'd been trying to expose something dangerous enough to get him killed. And his mother had kept this secret all these years, protecting Damon by staying silent. He examined the microfiche slides, but had no way to view them. He carefully packed everything back into the box and concealed it in his luggage. Tomorrow, he'd find a way to see what was on those slides. In the morning, Damon met with his mother's attorney, a silver-haired man who had handled the Thorne family's legal matters for decades. Your mother made some unusual requests in the months before her death, the attorney said, sliding a document across the desk. She changed her will to place certain conditions on your inheritance. Damon raised an eyebrow. Conditions? The house and half her financial assets transfer to you immediately. The remainder is held in trust for 1 year, to be released only if you fulfill her request for an independent investigation into your father's disappearance. Damon's pulse quickened. Did she say why? The attorney hesitated. She mentioned having new information, but wouldn't elaborate. I assumed it was the dementia, but she was insistent. After signing the necessary paperwork, Damon drove to a specialty shop that could read the microfiche. What he found left him breathless. The slides contained classified intelligence reports about a deep-cover Soviet operation called Project Nevsky from the late 1970s, an operation to plant sleeper agents in the United States. His father, as a counterintelligence analyst, had apparently discovered evidence that some of these agents had remained active well after the Soviet Union's collapse. The final slide contained a list of suspected sleeper agents and their American aliases. 2 names on the list had been circled: Alexei Kovalev and Elena Petrova. Damon's mind raced as he drove back to D.C. His mother's warning about Vivian seemed paranoid, but combined with his father's notes and the microfiche, a disturbing possibility was taking shape. Could there be a connection between his father's discovery of Soviet sleeper agents and Vivian's interest in his family? When Damon arrived home, the house was quiet. He called out for Vivian, but received no answer. Making his way to their home office, he heard the distinct sound of a paper shredder. Vivian stood by the desk, feeding documents into the machine. She startled when she saw him. Damon, you're home early. She switched off the shredder, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. What are you shredding? He asked, keeping his voice casual. Just old bills, she claimed, closing the shredder's lid. No point keeping them around. How was the meeting with the attorney? Straightforward, he replied, studying her. Was there tension in her shoulders? A guardedness in her eyes that hadn't been there before? Or was he seeing threats where none existed because of his mother's letter? I'm going to shower, he said, needing time to think. In the bathroom, Damon leaned against the counter, weighing his options. Direct confrontation would be a mistake if there was any truth to his suspicions. He needed evidence, one way or the other. That night, Damon feigned sleep while Vivian read beside him. When her breathing deepened and her book slipped from her fingers, he carefully got out of bed. In the home office, he examined the shredder bin. The papers had been reduced to thin strips, impossible to reconstruct easily. But one strip caught his eye, the letterhead of Northvale Psychiatric Facility, where his mother had spent her final months. Why would Vivian be shredding correspondence from his mother's care facility? Damon moved to Vivian's laptop, but it was password protected. Instead, he began a methodical search of the office, checking for hidden compartments or secret caches, techniques he'd learned in his military days. Behind a false panel in Vivian's desk drawer, he found a burner phone and a small key. The phone was dead, but the key looked like it might fit a safe deposit box. We're safe. A memory surfaced from when they'd first bought the house. The home inspector had mentioned an old coal room in the basement that had been sealed off during renovations. Damon had never given it much thought. Armed with a flashlight, he made his way to the basement. The renovated space served as a wine cellar and storage area, but one wall had always seemed out of place. Examining it closely now, Damon noticed subtle signs of a concealed door, the kind of details his security work had trained him to spot. It took him 20 minutes to find the hidden latch mechanism. The door swung open, revealing a small, concealed room. Inside was a safe bolted to the floor. Damon's heart pounded as he tried the key. It fit perfectly. Inside the safe were multiple passports, 5 in total, all with Vivian's photograph but different names. Elena Petrova, Sofia Markov, Natalia Orlova, Ivana Kurilenko, Katerina Sokolova, Elena Petrova. The same name circled in his father's microfiche. There were also bundles of cash in various currencies, several encrypted USB drives, and a small pistol with a silencer. As Damon took photos of the contents with his phone, the basement light suddenly switched on. I really wish you hadn't found those. Vivian's voice was different, harder, with the faintest trace of an accent he'd never noticed before. When he turned, she stood in the doorway, her expression cold and calculating. She wasn't alone. Behind her stood a man Damon recognized as Vincent Mercer, a State Department official he'd met at several of Vivian's events. "We try to warn your mother, too," Mercer said, raising what appeared to be a stun gun. She should have minded her own business. Like father, like son. In the split second before Mercer fired, Damon noticed something fall from Vivian's hand, a syringe. They weren't planning to kill him. Whatever they had planned was likely much worse. Damon dove to the side as Mercer fired, the stun gun's probes missing him by inches. In one fluid motion, he grabbed the pistol from the safe and fired twice. The silenced shots caught Mercer in the chest, sending him crumpling to the floor. Vivian was already running. Damon pursued her up the basement stairs, his mind ice-cold with fury and focus. In the kitchen, she grabbed a knife and now faced him with the practiced stance of someone trained in combat. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Damon," she said, her American accent completely gone now, replaced by a Russian one. "We can still salvage this." "Who are you?" he demanded, keeping the gun trained on her. "You know who I am," she replied. "I'm your wife." "My wife doesn't exist," Damon said. "Elena Petrova, I presume?" A flicker of surprise crossed her face. "How did you?" "My father figured it out 30 years ago, before your people killed him." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "The microfiche. That's what Eleanor was trying to tell me about. Why our family? Why me? Initially, your father was getting too close to exposing the program. After he was eliminated, you became valuable in your own right. The orphan son of a counterintelligence officer, with a chip on his shoulder and something to prove, working his way into defense contracts? You were the perfect target. 8 years, Damon said, his voice deadly quiet. 8 years of marriage. Was any of it real? For the first time, something like regret flashed across Vivian's, no, Elena's face. Parts. More than was supposed to be. Their standoff was interrupted by the sound of sirens in the distance. "Your neighbors have excellent hearing," Elena said with a grim smile. "This isn't over, Damon." Before he could stop her, she slashed the knife across her own arm, drawing blood, then dropped it and screamed, Help! He's gone crazy. He killed Vincent. The first police officers arrived to find a bleeding woman crying for help and a man holding a gun. Despite Damon's attempts to explain, he was handcuffed and taken into custody, watching helplessly as Elena was treated as the victim, her eyes meeting his with cold triumph as the ambulance doors closed between them. Chapter 3: Wheels Within Wheels. The interrogation room at the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department was deliberately uncomfortable. Hard chair, harsh lighting, and the constant sense of being watched. Damon sat perfectly still, his face betraying nothing as Detective Adelaide Foster reviewed his statement for the third time. So you're claiming your wife of 8 years is actually a Russian sleeper agent who married you to access classified information through your company, she summarized, skepticism heavy in her voice. And this Vincent Mercer, a respected State Department official, was her handler whom you shot in self-defense. That's correct, Damon replied evenly. And your evidence is a letter from your recently deceased mother who suffered from dementia. Some microfiche your father supposedly left before disappearing 32 years ago, and passports you found in a secret room that our officers couldn't locate during their search of your home. Damon met her gaze. The room is there. The safe is there. Your officers didn't find it because they weren't looking for it, or because it doesn't exist, she countered. Meanwhile, we have your wife with defensive wounds consistent with her statement that you became erratic after your mother's death, accused her of being a spy, and attacked her when she tried to calm you down. We have a dead body with 2 bullet wounds, and we have no history of Vincent Mercer being anything other than a mid-level diplomatic officer who happened to be visiting your wife about an upcoming fundraiser. The door opened, and a man in an impeccable suit entered. That's enough, Detective. I'm taking over this interview. Detective Foster bristled. And you are? The man flashed credentials. Agent Silas Palmer, FBI. This case involves national security matters now. After Foster reluctantly left, Palmer sat across from Damon. Thorn Defense Solutions. Top secret clearance. Contracts with DoD, Homeland Security, and 3-letter agencies I'm not at liberty to name. And now you're claiming your wife is a deep-cover Russian operative. That's quite a story. It's not a story, Damon said. Palmer slid a folder across the table. 2 hours ago, a team searched your basement again. They found the room and the safe. Both were empty. Damon's jaw tightened. She had accomplices. Maybe, Palmer conceded, or maybe there was never anything there. Check my phone. I took photos. Your phone was damaged, apparently during the struggle. No recoverable data. Damon felt the walls closing in. They planned this perfectly. Every piece of evidence was gone or discredited. Your wife has quite a different version of events, Palmer continued. She claims you've been acting increasingly paranoid since your mother's death, that you became convinced she was somehow involved in a conspiracy against you. And you believe her. I believe something happened in that basement, Palmer said carefully. I'm just not sure it's what either of you claims. What happens now? You're being transferred to federal custody. The shooting of a State Department official elevates this beyond local jurisdiction. As Damon was escorted to a waiting federal vehicle, he caught sight of a familiar face in the station. Levi West was speaking with another FBI agent, gesturing emphatically. When he saw Damon, he gave an almost imperceptible nod. The federal detention center was a stark improvement over the local jail, a private cell with actual quiet. Damon used the solitude to think, reviewing every detail, looking for any angle he might have missed. On the third day, Damon received his first visitor. Levi West sat across from him in the visitation room, concern etched on his face. You look like hell, Levi said. I've been better, Damon admitted. How did you find me? Wasn't easy. They're keeping your case very quiet. Had to call in some favors from our Army days. Levi leaned forward. What really happened, Damon? Damon studied his friend carefully before responding. Everything I told the police is true. Vivian is not who she claims to be. Levi nodded slowly. I believe you, and I'm not the only one. That FBI agent, Palmer, he approached me after I tried to see you at the police station. He's suspicious about how quickly certain departments move to contain this situation. He thinks there's a cover-up. He didn't say that explicitly, but he asked a lot of questions about your wife's connections to government officials through her event planning business. Hope flickered in Damon's chest. What about the company? Managing as best we can. The news of your arrest hasn't broken widely yet. Someone's keeping a tight lid on it. I need you to do something for me, Damon said quietly. It's risky. Name it. My mother's house in Virginia. In the basement, behind a loose brick, there's a metal box with microfiche. It's the only evidence I have left. Levi's expression turned grim. The house was broken into yesterday. Your mother's attorney called me. The place was ransacked. Damon closed his eyes briefly. Of course Elena would cover all bases. But, Levi continued with a small smile, I made a copy of your father's case file years ago, when you first brought me into the company. I always wondered why he disappeared. The file doesn't have a microfiche, but it has his notes about Project Nevsky and the names he was investigating. For the first time in days, Damon felt a spark of hope. Get that file to Palmer. And Levi, watch your back. These people are professionals, and they've had decades to embed themselves. After Levi left, Damon was returned to his cell. That night, he was awakened by the sound of his cell door opening. Agent Palmer stood in the doorway with another agent. On your feet, Thorne. You're being moved. Where to? Somewhere we can talk securely. Palmer's voice was barely above a whisper. Your friend Wes came through with some very interesting reading material. They escorted Damon to an unmarked SUV. As they drove through the dark streets of D.C., Palmer explained the situation. Vincent Mercer's autopsy revealed something unexpected, a Soviet-era dental implant technique that was only used for their elite intelligence officers. We've been quietly investigating him for months as part of a counterintelligence operation. Your shooting him forced us to accelerate our timeline. And Vivian, Elena Petrova, Palmer corrected. We've confirmed her identity through facial recognition against KGB archives. She's a second-generation operative, born to deep-cover agents, raised in America, but trained during overseas study-abroad programs. The perfect sleeper. Why are you telling me this now? Because we need your help to catch her and her network. She thinks you're out of the game, locked up and discredited. That makes you our best asset. What's the plan? We're going to let you escape. Chapter 4. The Hunter. The safe house in rural Pennsylvania was modest. A 2-bedroom farmhouse surrounded by acres of empty fields. Perfect sight lines in all directions. No neighbors to ask questions. Damon stood by the window, watching as Palmer and the rest of the FBI team set up surveillance equipment. It had been 3 days since his staged escape from federal custody, an event now making headlines across the country. Defense contractor accused of murder escapes during transport. The manhunt was the perfect cover. While authorities publicly searched for him, Damon was working with a select counterintelligence team to unravel Elena's network. Your wife has been busy, Palmer said, joining him at the window. Since your arrest, she's contacted 17 individuals we now believe are part of her network. Diplomats, military contractors, congressional staffers. She's activating contingency plans, Damon replied. Securing whatever intelligence she's gathered, preparing extraction routes. But she hasn't left the country. In fact, she's been remarkably public, giving tearful interviews about her fears that her disturbed husband might return to harm her. She's playing the victim while she ties up loose ends, Damon said. Elena knows I had evidence, but doesn't know exactly what or where is now. She needs to ensure anything that could expose their operation is destroyed before she disappears. She's also liquidating your assets, emptying accounts, selling properties. Damon's jaw tightened. She had access to everything. Not quite everything, Palmer said, sliding a folder across the table. Your military pension and a safety deposit box in Arlington remain untouched. She either doesn't know about them or couldn't access them. The safety deposit box. Damon had almost forgotten about it. He'd opened it years ago, after a particularly close call during a security consultation in Baghdad. It contained emergency cash, a clean passport, and a key to a storage unit in West Virginia where he kept survival supplies and weapons. Insurance against a world that could turn hostile without warning. I need to access that box, Damon said. Palmer shook his head. Too risky. Every law enforcement agency in the D.C. area is looking for you. Then send someone you trust. The box contains resources we might need. As days passed in the safe house, Damon immersed himself in the intelligence reports, learning the true extent of the Russian sleeper network. Project Nevsky hadn't ended with the Soviet Union's collapse. It had evolved, with a new generation of agents embedded in American society. According to the FBI's analysis, at least 30 deep-cover operatives were currently active in positions of influence throughout government, defense, and technology sectors. The operation to identify these agents had been codenamed Chimera, run jointly by the FBI and CIA for the past 5 years. Palmer had been leading the domestic side of the investigation, gradually building evidence against suspected operatives without tipping them off. We were close to rolling up a significant part of the network when you shot Mercer, Palmer explained. His death forced their hand. Some agents have already gone dark, abandoned identities, missing from their posts. And we have no idea who's pulling the strings. We have theories. The most likely candidate is this man. Palmer pulled up a file on his laptop. Mikhail Vetrov, former KGB, now operates as a private security consultant with ties to Russian intelligence. He's been spotted in the U.S. 7 times in the past decade, always with perfect cover stories. Damon studied the photograph of a severe-looking man in his 60s with steel-gray hair and cold eyes. Something about the face triggered a distant memory. "I've seen him before," Damon said slowly. "At a fundraiser Vivian organized 3 years ago. He was introduced as a Norwegian shipping executive." Palmer nodded grimly. "That tracks with his known movements. We believe he periodically enters the country to meet with his top agents personally." A junior agent entered with his satellite phone. "Sir, we have a situation. Elena Petrova just booked a flight to Geneva for tomorrow evening." "She's running," Palmer said. "No," Damon countered. "She's setting a trap. Elena knows I'm working with you now. She's dangling bait, hoping we'll move against her at the airport where she'll have backup waiting." "What makes you so sure?" "Because it's what I would do, and she knows how I think." Damon's face hardened. 8 years of marriage gives you insight. Then what's her real exit strategy? "Water," Damon said confidently. "It's harder to track, harder to monitor. There's a good chance she has a rendezvous arranged with a private vessel somewhere along the coast." Palmer considered this. "We'll need to monitor all major marinas from Maine to Virginia. Focus on the Chesapeake Bay," Damon suggested. "Countless inlets, minimal Coast Guard presence in the more remote areas. It's what I would choose." That evening, confirmation came through Palmer's secure channels. A private yacht registered to a shell company with Russian connections had recently anchored in a secluded part of the Chesapeake Bay. "We have her exit vehicle," Palmer announced. "Now we need to track her to it and catch her with whatever intelligence she's planning to exfiltrate." "You won't catch her by following," Damon said. "She's too good, too careful. We need to get ahead of her, predict her movements, and be waiting." "Ow! We can't cover every possible route." "We don't need to." Damon pulled out a map of Maryland's eastern shore. "There are only 3 practical routes from D.C. to this marina that avoid major checkpoints. And I know which one she'll take." "How can you be so sure?" "Because she planned it with my expertise," Damon said with grim satisfaction. 3 years ago, Elena asked me to design escape routes from D.C. for a wealthy client concerned about civil unrest. I created 5 options. This route was my favorite, the one I said I would choose myself. Palmer studied him carefully. "You really think she'll use your own escape plan?" "It's elegant in its way," Damon replied, "using my knowledge against me. It's been her method from the beginning." The next day, as Elena's flight to Geneva departed without her, the FBI team positioned themselves along the route Damon had identified. Palmer remained skeptical, but he had few better options. At a remote gas station in rural Maryland, the trap was set. Damon, disguised and positioned inside the store, watched as a silver SUV with diplomatic plates pulled in for fuel shortly after midnight. Elena emerged from the passenger side, her hair now blonde and cut short. The driver remained in the vehicle. "Target confirmed," Damon whispered into his concealed microphone. "She has one visible accomplice." Proceeding as planned. As Elena entered the store to pay for the fuel, Damon brushed past her, slipping a tracking device into her coat pocket. Their eyes met for the briefest moment, hers widening in shock before her training reasserted control. By the time she reached for the weapon in her purse, Damon was already out the back door, disappearing into the darkness. "Tracker is live," Palmer confirmed through Damon's earpiece. "We have her." From their mobile command center, they watched as the SUV continued toward the Chesapeake. Rather than attempting an arrest on the road, which could turn deadly, Palmer's team prepared to intercept them at the marina. "She recognized me," Damon said. "She'll be suspicious, checking for surveillance." "That's the beauty of this new tracker," Palmer explained. "It transmits in bursts every 15 minutes rather than continuously. Much harder to detect with standard countermeasures." The SUV took an unexpected turn, deviating from the anticipated route. "She's made us," one of the agents announced. "No," Damon corrected, studying the map. "She's being thorough. This is a counter-surveillance route. Loops back to the main road after 5 miles. I included it in my original plan." Sure enough, after a series of confusing turns designed to shake any tail, the SUV returned to the primary route toward the marina. When they were 10 minutes out, Palmer mobilized his team. "Remember, we need her alive," he instructed. "She's more valuable as an intelligence asset than a conviction." The operation went almost perfectly. As Elena and her companion approached the dock, FBI agents swarmed from concealed positions. The driver, identified later as another Russian operative named Konstantin Baranov, was killed in the ensuing gunfight. Elena was captured, but not before destroying a thumb drive containing what they presumed was the intelligence she planned to exfiltrate. As agents secured the scene, Damon approached the yacht. Something seemed off about the vessel, too obvious, too perfectly aligned with their intelligence. "Palmer," he called out, "this feels wrong." Before Palmer could respond, a burst of automatic gunfire erupted from a nearby fishing boat that had appeared unremarkable in the darkness. 3 agents fell immediately. "It's an ambush!" Palmer shouted, diving for cover. In the chaos that followed, Elena broke free from her captors, sprinting toward the fishing boat. Damon pursued, ignoring Palmer's shouts to take cover. As Elena leapt from the dock, Damon tackled her, both of them tumbling into the cold waters of the Chesapeake. Underwater, they grappled fiercely. Elena's training was evident in her precision and strength, but Damon's raw power and rage gave him the advantage. He managed to subdue her, dragging her back to the surface and the dock, where Palmer and the surviving agents had neutralized the threat from the fishing boat. Elena, soaking and defeated, glared at Damon with pure hatred. "You've ruined everything," she spat. "No," Damon replied coldly. "I'm just getting started." Chapter 5, House of Mirrors. The secure FBI facility outside Quantico hummed with activity as analysts combed through the intelligence seized from Elena's fishing boat. Damon stood behind a one-way mirror, watching as Palmer conducted the initial interrogation of Elena Petrova. She sat with perfect posture, her face composed despite her prison jumpsuit and the handcuffs securing her to the table. She had revealed nothing in the 48 hours since her capture. "She's been trained for this," Palmer said, joining Damon in the observation room. "Standard interrogation techniques won't work." "You're approaching her wrong," Damon replied. "She's not just a trained operative. She's someone who lived a lie for years. The psychological strain of maintaining a false identity that long changes a person. There are cracks in her armor if you know where to look. And you think you know? I was married to her for 8 years. I know her triggers, her vulnerabilities, the parts of herself she couldn't completely hide, even when playing a role." Palmer considered this. "What do you suggest?" "Let me talk to her." "That's against protocol. You're a civilian witness, not an agent. You've gotten nowhere in 2 days. What do you have to lose?" After consultation with his superiors, Palmer reluctantly agreed. Damon was wired with a concealed microphone and given strict parameters for the conversation. When Damon entered the interrogation room, Elena's mask of indifference slipped momentarily, revealing genuine surprise before she regained control. "Hello, Elena," Damon said calmly, taking the seat across from her. My name is Vivian, she replied automatically. No, it isn't. Damon placed a file on the table. Your real name is Elena Ivanovna Petrova, born in Leningrad in 1985 to Katia and Ivan Petrov, both deep-cover KGB operatives assigned to the United States in 1979. You were raised in Seattle under the name Emily Wilson, attended Stanford University, where your study abroad programs in Europe were actually training sessions with Russian intelligence. Elena's expression remained neutral, but Damon caught the slight twitch in her left eye, a tell he'd noticed years ago when she was genuinely rattled. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. Your parents were extracted back to Russia in 2006 after Ivan developed cancer. They currently live in a government-provided apartment in Moscow. Your mother teaches English at a private academy. Your father died in 2018. Now Elena's composure fractured visibly. How do you know about your parents? The same way I know about your childhood dog, Misha, or the scar on your right knee from falling off a bicycle when you were 9, or how you can't stand the smell of anise because it reminds you of medicine your grandmother used to give you. These were details Elena had shared during their marriage, personal touches to make her cover identity more authentic. The fact that they were actually true made her performance more convincing. What do you want? She finally asked, her accent now fully Russian. The truth. All of it. Starting with my father. Elena studied him for a long moment. Your father discovered Project Nevsky just as the Soviet Union was collapsing. He identified several deep-cover agents, including my parents. He was going to expose the entire program. So he was killed. Yes. On whose orders? Mikhail Vetrov. He was the KGB resident for the eastern United States at the time. Now he runs the entire sleeper program. And my mother? Why was she allowed to live? Initially, she knew nothing specific. By the time she began to suspect the truth years later, you had already become a person of interest due to your work in defense contracting. Eliminating her would have drawn unwanted attention. So they sent you to marry me instead. Elena's eyes met his directly. Yes, my assignment was to gain access to your classified work and identify vulnerabilities in the security systems you designed. For 8 years. Yes. Damon leaned forward. Did you ever actually care? Or was it all an act? For the first time, Elena's composure faltered completely. It was supposed to be just an assignment. You were just a target. She paused, conflict visible on her face. But living with someone for years, it becomes complicated. Not complicated enough to stop you from planning to disappear with everything you stole from me. That was always the endgame, Damon. Extract the intelligence and return home. And if I had discovered the truth sooner, would you have killed me like my father? Elena didn't answer immediately. That was the contingency plan, yes. But I argued against it. I convinced Vetrov that maintaining cover and continuing the intelligence gathering was more valuable than eliminating one potential threat. Damon absorbed this with cold detachment. Where's Vetrov now? I don't know. We communicate through cutouts and dead drops. I haven't seen him in person in over a year. What about the rest of your network? The other sleeper agents? Elena smiled thinly. I've told you enough for today. Over the following weeks, Elena provided carefully measured information, enough to appear cooperative without compromising the most valuable assets in her network. Each revelation was verified against existing intelligence, building a clearer picture of the Russian operation. Meanwhile, Damon struggled with the aftershocks of betrayal. Every memory of his marriage was now tainted, every moment of intimacy revealed as calculation. At night, in the small apartment the FBI had arranged for him, he pored over case files, searching for connections and patterns the analysts might have missed. One morning, Palmer arrived with troubling news. We have a problem. The evidence against Elena is being questioned by certain officials in the Justice Department. There's pressure to classify this entire case on national security grounds. Meaning what? Meaning someone powerful wants this buried. We think at least one of the sleeper agents has enough influence to interfere with the prosecution. You're saying she might walk? Not walk exactly, but potentially be traded back to Russia in a quiet prisoner exchange rather than facing trial here. Which means we lose our best source of information about the network. Damon processed this, fury building inside him. What about the evidence from the fishing boat? Most of it is technical intelligence, security protocols, system vulnerabilities. Valuable, but not directly incriminating for the wider network of agents. Then we need something more damning. Something that can't be buried. Like what? Like Vetrov himself. Damon's eyes gleamed with dangerous intensity. Elena is a valuable asset, but she's ultimately just an operative. Vetrov is the mastermind. If we capture him on American soil, this whole case becomes too big to disappear. And how exactly do we catch a ghost who's eluded intelligence agencies for decades? By giving him something he can't resist, Damon said. Me? The plan that emerged was audacious and extremely high risk. Using carefully controlled leaks, they would create the impression that Damon had accessed a complete list of Russian sleeper agents from his father's old files. Information so damaging that it threatened the entire network. Vetrov will have to respond, Damon explained. He can't risk exposure of assets he spent decades cultivating. He'll either send a team to eliminate me or come himself to assess the situation. And if he sends assassins rather than coming personally, then we capture them and use them to get to him. One way or another, Vetrov shows himself. Palmer was skeptical, but saw few alternatives as political pressure mounted to resolve the case quietly. With reluctant approval from FBI leadership, Operation Mirror was launched. The bait was set through a series of calculated moves. First, Damon was publicly released from custody, with leaked reports suggesting he had been cleared of all charges due to new evidence he had provided to authorities. Then, he returned to his company, Thorn Defense Solutions, announcing a new security protocol he was developing based on recently discovered family documents. For 2 weeks, Damon lived in careful visibility, following predictable patterns while under constant FBI surveillance. He visited the same coffee shop each morning, worked late at his office, and took evening runs along a predictable route in Rock Creek Park. The response, when it came, was both swift and unexpected. Not assassins in the night, but a simple phone call to Damon's direct line at Thorn Defense. "Mr. Thorn," said a heavily accented voice, "I believe we have mutual interest to discuss. The Huntington Hotel, room 712, tonight at 9 p.m. Come alone, or certain unfortunate videos of your wife might find their way to your federal friends." The call was too brief to trace, but voice analysis confirmed what Damon already suspected. Mikhail Vetrov had taken the bait personally. "It's too perfect," Palmer warned during their hasty planning session. "He's drawing you into an environment he controls." "Of course he is," Damon agreed. "But he's also making a critical mistake. He's underestimating how far I'll go to finish this." The Huntington was an upscale boutique hotel in Georgetown. Room 712 was a corner suite with 2 possible access points, the main door and a connecting door to room 710. FBI surveillance confirmed Vetrov had booked both rooms under different aliases. "We'll have teams covering all exits and adjacent rooms," Palmer explained. "But we can't risk having agents too close. Vetrov will have counter-surveillance measures in place." "I'll be wearing the concealed transmitter," Damon said. "Once I confirm it's Vetrov, give me 3 minutes to get what we need on record, then move in. And if things go sideways before that..." Damon checked the small backup weapon strapped to his ankle, a concession Palmer had reluctantly allowed. "Then I'll improvise." At 8:55 p.m., Damon entered the Huntington, projecting the confidence of a man who believed he held the upper hand. Hotel security footage would later show nothing unusual about his demeanor as he took the elevator to the 7th floor. The corridor was empty when he approached room 712. He knocked twice, waiting as he heard movement inside. When the door opened, Damon found himself face to face with the man who had orchestrated his father's death and his wife's betrayal. Mikhail Vetrov had aged since the photographs in his file, but his eyes remained sharp and calculating. He gestured Damon inside with a slight smile. "Mr. Thorn, I've looked forward to meeting you properly." His English was perfect, with only the faintest trace of a Russian accent. "Please take a seat." The suite was elegant but sparsely furnished. Damon noted the absence of visible security, no obvious bodyguards or weapons. Either Vetrov was supremely confident, or his protection was more subtly arranged. "I'll stand," Damon replied coldly. "As you wish." Vetrov moved to a small bar cart and poured 2 glasses of vodka. "You've caused quite a disruption to my operation. Decades of careful work, compromised because you couldn't leave well enough alone, just like your father. My father was right about you. Your father was naive. He believed in black and white, good and evil. The real world operates in shades of gray, as I'm sure you've learned from your own government's reaction to this situation." Vetrov offered a glass to Damon, who ignored it. "They're already looking for ways to bury this, aren't they? Too many powerful people implicated, too many uncomfortable questions. Is that why you're here? To negotiate a cover-up?" Vetrov smiled thinly. "I'm here to propose a mutually beneficial resolution. The complete list of agents your father identified. I want it and any copies you made. And in return, you get to live, your reputation restored, perhaps even financial compensation for your marital difficulties. That's your offer? Money, after everything you've taken from me?" "What I've taken?" Vetrov laughed coldly. "Your father was collateral damage in a larger conflict. And Elena, she was never yours to begin with. She belonged to Russia long before she met you." The casual dismissal of his father's murder and his wife's betrayal ignited something primal in Damon. The transmitter in his watch recorded everything, but 3 minutes suddenly seemed too long to wait. "Where's the list?" Vetrov demanded, his patience visibly thinning. "There is no list," Damon replied. "At least, not the complete one you fear. But I have something better. You admitting to a decades-long espionage operation on American soil. My father's murder. All of it recorded and transmitting to the FBI as we speak." Vetrov's expression darkened. A foolish gambit. He reached inside his jacket, but Damon was already moving. Years of combat training took over as he closed the distance between them in 2 swift strides. Before Vetrov could draw his weapon, Damon delivered a devastating strike to his throat, followed by a precise blow to his knee that sent the older man crashing to the floor. The door burst open as FBI agents swarmed the room, weapons drawn. Palmer entered last, surveying the scene with grim satisfaction. "Mikhail Vetrov, you're under arrest for espionage, murder, and conspiracy against the United States," he announced formally. As agents secured Vetrov, Damon knelt beside the struggling man. "This is for my father," he whispered, "and for the 8 years you stole from me." Chapter 6. Bloodlines. 3 months after Vetrov's capture, the case had expanded far beyond anyone's initial expectations. 17 Russian sleeper agents had been identified and arrested across the United States. High-ranking officials in the State Department, Pentagon, and even Congress had been implicated in unwitting cooperation with Russian intelligence. Damon sat in Palmer's office, reviewing the latest briefing. The media had labeled it the Ghost Network case, the largest foreign intelligence breach since the Cold War. "Vetrov is negotiating a plea deal," Palmer announced, setting down a classified file. "In exchange for avoiding the death penalty, he's offering details on operations dating back to the Soviet era, including my father's murder. Full confession, with names of the actual killers. They're both dead now, but at least you'll have closure." Damon nodded, but closure felt like a distant concept. "And Elena? Still providing intelligence, though we've squeezed most of the valuable information from her already. Her testimony will be crucial in several upcoming trials." The personal cost of the investigation had been steep. Thorn Defense Solutions had lost several government contracts due to security concerns, though Damon's personal reputation had been restored once the full scope of the Russian operation became public. He had sold his house, unable to face living in a space so thoroughly contaminated by lies, and moved into a Spartan apartment in Alexandria. "There's something else," Palmer said hesitantly. "Something that came up during Vetrov's debriefing that you should know." "What is it?" Palmer slid a folder across the desk. "DNA results. Standard procedure when processing high-value intelligence assets." Damon opened the folder, scanning the technical data before reaching the conclusion highlighted at the bottom. His blood ran cold. "This can't be right," he said, his voice tight. "We ran the test 3 times to be sure. According to the report, Mikhail Vetrov was Damon's biological father. He's lying, Damon insisted. This is some kind of psychological warfare. The science is conclusive, Damon. And once we had the results, we went back through your father's, through Richard Thorne's old case files. There were inconsistencies in his background that counterintelligence missed at the time. He wasn't just investigating Project Nevsky. He was part of a specialized task force focused specifically on Vetrov. What are you saying? We believe Richard discovered that Vetrov had a relationship with your mother years earlier, realized you were Vetrov's biological son, and was preparing to expose everything when he was killed. The room seemed to tilt as decades of certainty crumbled around Damon. His entire identity, the righteous quest to avenge his father, was built on a foundation of lies. Does Elena know? Not yet. This information is extremely compartmentalized. Damon stood abruptly. I need to speak with him. That's not advisable. I wasn't asking permission. Special arrangements were made for Damon to meet with Vetrov at the secure facility where he was being held. The room was sparse. A metal table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs, and continuous surveillance. When Vetrov entered, shackled and escorted by guards, he smiled at the sight of Damon. It was a smile of genuine pleasure, not the cold calculation Damon had seen at the hotel. My son, Vetrov said simply once they were alone. I'm not your son, Damon replied through clenched teeth. Biology suggests otherwise. Biology is just chemistry. It doesn't make you my father. Vetrov nodded thoughtfully. Richard Thorne was a good man. He raised you well, despite knowing the truth. That took exceptional character. When? Damon demanded. When were you with my mother? 1979. Eleanor was working as a secretary at the State Department. Beautiful, intelligent, and with access to diplomatic communications. I was posing as a Swedish cultural attaché. Our relationship lasted 6 months before my assignment changed. Vetrov's expression softened with what appeared to be genuine reminiscence. I didn't know about you until years later, when KGB surveillance identified Richard Thorne investigating Project Nevsky. Standard procedure included background checks on his family. The timing of your birth raised questions. So you had him killed? I gave the order, Vetrov admitted. But had I known then what I know now, I might have made a different choice. What's that supposed to mean? Richard discovered you were my biological son. He could have used that information against me, exposed me. Instead, he kept it secret, protecting you from the truth. When I learned this, I developed a respect for him and a curiosity about you. So you sent Elena to spy on me? Your own son? Initially, the assignment was standard procedure. You had access to valuable intelligence through your company. But yes, I personally selected Elena for the mission. I wanted someone I trusted to be close to you, to manipulate me, to know you, Vetrov corrected. Consider it a father's peculiar way of staying connected to a son he could never acknowledge. The casual cruelty of this statement left Damon momentarily speechless. His entire life had been shaped by this man's decisions. His father's murder, his mother's decades of grief, and his marriage to a woman who had never truly existed. You destroyed my family. I gave you life, Vetrov countered. And whether you accept it or not, my blood runs in your veins. The same intelligence, the same ruthlessness when necessary. How else could you have caught me when so many others failed? We're nothing alike. No. Consider how quickly you adapted when you discovered Elena's betrayal. How efficiently you set a trap and executed your plan. Those aren't traits Richard Thorne possessed. They're mine. They're ours. Damon stood, unwilling to hear more. This changes nothing. You're still going to spend the rest of your life in prison for what you've done. As he turned to leave, Vetrov called after him. Ask yourself this, Damon. If you truly believed we were nothing alike, why did you come here today? What answer were you hoping to find? The question followed Damon out of the facility and haunted him through the days that followed. He threw himself into work, rebuilding his company's reputation and developing new security protocols based on vulnerabilities identified during the Ghost Network investigation. A week later, Palmer contacted him with a new development. Elena is asking to see you. She says there's something you need to know that isn't in her official testimony. More lies. Maybe. but she seems different. The psychiatrists say she's experiencing genuine psychological distress. Whatever she wants to tell you, she believes it's important. Against his better judgment, Damon agreed to the meeting. Elena was being held at a different facility than Vetrov, a medium-security federal detention center where cooperative intelligence assets were sometimes housed during debriefing. When he entered the visitation room, he barely recognized her. Gone was the polished, confident woman he had married. In her place sat someone whose edges had been worn raw, her composure replaced by visible exhaustion. "Thank you for coming," she said in Russian-accented English. She no longer maintained the pretense of her American persona. "Palmer said you had something to tell me." Elena studied him intently. "You've spoken with Vetrov. How did you know?" "I can see it in your face." "The same shock I felt when he told me the truth." Elena leaned forward. "He didn't tell me until after we were married. Said it added a poetic symmetry to the mission." "What mission? Spying on me?" "No, Damon. Creating a child." The words hit Damon like a physical blow. "What?" "Our marriage wasn't just about intelligence gathering. Vetrov wanted his bloodline continued through you, a grandchild he could eventually bring into the fold. Our child would have dual citizenship, impeccable American credentials through you, but ultimately loyalty to Russia through me. We never had children, not for lack of trying on my part. The fertility issues I pretended to have, another lie. I was taking contraceptives the entire time, waiting until Vetrov gave the order to proceed." Damon felt physically ill at the calculated depravity of the scheme. "When did he plan to tell me any of this?" "Never. Once we had a child, my extraction plan would have included taking the child with me back to Russia. You would have been told we died in an accident." The full weight of the manipulation, spanning generations and destroying countless lives, settled over Damon. Elena, watching his reaction, continued in a softer voice. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Damon. What I did is unforgivable, but you deserve to know the complete truth." "Why tell me this now?" "Because despite everything, those 8 years weren't entirely a lie. Not for me." Elena's composure cracked, revealing genuine emotion beneath. "I followed orders. I betrayed you. But somewhere along the way, I also began to care. Not enough to abandon my mission, but enough to hate myself for what I was doing." Damon stood, unable to bear any more revelations. "I hope you find peace with that someday, Elena." "I won't." As he turned to leave, she called after him. "Damon, Vetrov will try to use the biological connection to manipulate you. Don't let him. You're nothing like him. I've known you both, and you're nothing like him at all." Outside the detention center, Damon sat in his car for a long time, processing everything he had learned. His life had been built on lies so intricate and spanning so many years that separating truth from manipulation seemed impossible. That night, in his Spartan apartment, he pulled out an old photo album his mother had kept. Pictures of Richard Thorne holding him as a baby, teaching him to ride a bike, attending his high school graduation. The man who had raised him knowing he wasn't his biological son, who had died trying to protect him from Vetrov's world. The truth was painful, but it also brought clarity. Biology didn't define family. Richard Thorne was his true father in every way that mattered. And Vetrov's blood in his veins didn't determine his character or his future choices. With that realization came the beginnings of a plan, one final move in the long game that had begun before he was born. Chapter 7. Shadows of the Past. 6 months passed. The Ghost Network case had faded from headlines, replaced by newer scandals and crises. Behind the scenes, however, the investigation continued to unravel decades of Russian intelligence operations. Vetrov's cooperation had proven valuable, resulting in the identification of sleeper agents in 5 allied countries and the disruption of several active intelligence operations. Damon had rebuilt Thorne Defense Solutions, focusing on cybersecurity and counterintelligence consulting. The company's reputation had recovered, bolstered by Damon's public role in exposing the Russian network. To outward appearances, he had moved on from the personal devastation, channeling his energy into productive work. In reality, he was executing a carefully constructed plan, one that had begun the moment he learned Vetrov was his biological father. "You've been meeting with Vetrov regularly," Palmer observed during one of their infrequent dinners. The FBI agent had become something of a friend during the investigation, one of the few people who understood what Damon had endured. "Twice a month," Damon confirmed. "He has valuable insights about Russian intelligence methodologies. It helps me design better security protocols." Palmer studied him carefully. "That's the official reason. What's the real one?" "He's dying," Damon said simply. "Advanced pancreatic cancer. 6 months at most, according to the prison doctors." "And you feel what? Obligation? Curiosity? Closure, maybe?" Damon shrugged. "Or perhaps I'm just keeping my enemies closer." The truth was more complex. Through careful cultivation of their relationship, Damon had earned Vetrov's trust, or at least as much trust as a lifelong spymaster could offer. The older man, facing mortality, had become increasingly willing to share details about his operations, his methods, and the network of loyalists who remained at large. In Vetrov's mind, he was passing on his legacy to his son. In Damon's, he was gathering intelligence for a final reckoning. "What about Elena?" Palmer asked, still refusing to see her. "Nothing to say." Damon's tone made clear the subject was closed. Elena had been transferred to a witness protection program after her testimony secured convictions against several high-ranking collaborators. Her new identity and location were closely guarded secrets, even from Damon, who had shown no interest in her fate. After dinner, returning to his apartment, Damon received a call on a secure line few people possessed. "It's done," Levi West said without preamble. "The Norway connection is confirmed. Our friend there has agreed to the arrangement." "Good. Timeline? 3 weeks. Any chance you'll tell me what this is about?" "Plausible deniability, Levi. The less you know, the better." The following day, Damon visited Vetrov at the secure medical facility where he'd been transferred as his condition worsened. The once imposing spymaster had become gaunt, his vitality drained by both cancer and chemotherapy. "My son," Vetrov greeted him, the term still grating on Damon's nerves despite months of hearing it. "You look troubled today." "Just business concerns," Damon replied, taking the chair beside the hospital bed. "Security breach at a client's facility in Oslo." Vetrov's interest visibly sharpened, years of intelligence tradecraft overriding even his physical discomfort. "Norway has always been an interesting operational territory. Border with Russia, NATO membership, significant oil wealth. We had several assets there during my time. Anyone still active?" Damon asked casually. "Perhaps. One never reveals all one's cards, even when supposedly cooperating." Vetrov smiled weakly. "But I might know someone who could help with your situation." A gesture of paternal goodwill. This was Vetrov's pattern, dangling intelligence as a way to forge connection, to create a sense of conspiracy between them. Damon had learned to navigate these waters carefully, accepting some offerings while seeming to reject others. "I'm listening." Christian Berg, officially a petroleum engineer with Norwegian State Oil Company. Unofficially, one of my most valuable assets for decades. If there's unusual activity in Norway's security sector, he would know. And I suppose he'd help me because I would ask him to. Vetrov's pride in his lingering influence was evident. Some loyalties transcend political changes and prison walls. Damon appeared to consider this. "If I were to contact him, how would I establish credibility?" "Tell him the Falcon remembers Minsk in winter. He'll understand." Vetrov studied Damon closely. "But be careful. Berg is from the old school. Ruthless when necessary. Like father, like son?" Damon suggested with calculated ambiguity. Vetrov smiled, pleased by what he interpreted as acceptance of their connection. "Precisely." Over the next 3 weeks, Damon maintained his normal routine while finalizing preparations. He visited Vetrov twice more, each time extracting additional information about the remaining network of loyalists, names, locations, communication protocols. Information that Vetrov believed would help Damon establish himself within that network after his death. The day before his planned departure for Oslo, Damon received an urgent call from Palmer. "Vetrov's condition has deteriorated rapidly. Doctors say it's a matter of days now. He's asking for you. At the medical facility, Damon found Vetrov drifting in and out of consciousness, his breathing labored. When Damon entered, the older man's eyes flickered open. "You came," he whispered. "I did. There isn't much time." Vetrov gestured weakly toward a guard. "I've arranged something. A legacy. The only thing a father can give a son he never knew." The guard approached with a small box, which he handed to Damon after receiving a nod from the supervising agent. "My personal effects," Vetrov explained. "Nothing of obvious intelligence value, so they've allowed me to designate a recipient. Open it." Inside was a collection of seemingly innocuous items. A Soviet-era watch, a weathered leather notebook filled with what appeared to be poetry in Russian, and an old photograph of a young woman Damon recognized as his mother, Eleanor. "The watch contains a microdot under the faceplate," Vetrov said quietly. "Account numbers, access codes. Resources I kept hidden from both sides. Enough to finance whatever future you choose." Damon stared at the items, understanding the significance of what Vetrov was offering. Not just money, but entry into a shadow world, a continuation of Vetrov's legacy through him. "And if I choose a different path than yours?" Vetrov's laugh turned into a painful cough. "Then you're truly your mother's son as well. The choice is yours. That's my final gift to you, freedom to choose." Later that night, in his apartment, Damon examined the watch carefully. Using precision tools, he removed the faceplate and found exactly what Vetrov had described, a microdot containing banking details for accounts in Switzerland, Singapore, and the Cayman Islands. Accounts that had likely gone undiscovered during the investigation. He photographed the information, then reassembled the watch and placed all the items back in the box. Whatever his feelings toward Vetrov, these were pieces of his history, complicated, painful, but his. The following morning, Damon boarded a commercial flight to Oslo using his own passport and making no attempt to conceal his travel. If anyone was watching, either Russian intelligence or FBI counterintelligence, his movements would appear transparent and legitimate. Thorn Defense Solutions had recently established a satellite office in Oslo, providing perfect cover for his visit. In Oslo, Damon checked into the Grand Hotel and spent the first day in visible business meetings at his company's office. That evening, he followed Vetrov's instructions, making contact with Christian Berg at a specific restaurant known for its discretion. Berg was in his 60s, with the weathered complexion of someone who had spent time on oil platforms despite his executive position. His handshake was firm, his eyes evaluative as Damon delivered Vetrov's passphrase. "So you're Mikhail's son," Berg said in lightly accented English once they were seated in a private dining room. "He told me about you years ago. I didn't believe it then. But you believe it now. You have his eyes. That particular shade of gray. I've only seen it in the Vetrov bloodline." Berg studied him carefully. "What exactly do you want from me, Mr. Thorne?" "Information, initially. Guidance, potentially." Damon maintained the persona he had carefully constructed for this meeting. A man coming to terms with his true heritage, cautiously exploring connections to his biological father's world. "And why should I help you?" "Because Vetrov is dying, and he asked you to. Because whatever loyalty you feel toward him, he clearly expects it to transfer to me." Damon leaned forward. "And because I have resources that might benefit us both." Berg's expression remained neutral, but interest flickered in his eyes. "What kind of resources?" "Financial, for one." Vetrov provided access to accounts unknown to American authorities. For the next hour, Damon navigated a careful conversation, establishing credibility without committing himself too deeply, expressing curiosity about Berg's operations while revealing little about his own intentions. By the end, Berg seemed cautiously receptive. "There's an event tomorrow night," Berg said as they prepared to leave. "A reception at the Russian trade mission. Several people who shared your father's perspective will be there. Perhaps you'd like to attend as my guest." "I would." "Good. And Mr. Thorne? Come armed. Old habits die hard in our circle." Back at his hotel, Damon encrypted and sent a brief message to a secure server. Contact established. Proceeding to Phase 2. The following evening, Damon dressed in a tailored suit and made his way to the Russian trade mission, a stately building in Oslo's diplomatic quarter. As Berg's guest, he passed security with minimal scrutiny, though he noted the careful assessment by guards who were clearly more than standard diplomatic security. Inside, the reception appeared to be a typical diplomatic function, representatives from various countries mingling over champagne and canapes. Berg introduced Damon to selected guests, primarily Eastern European business figures with vague affiliations. Most are simply commercial contacts, Berg explained quietly. But a few are continuing your father's work, shall we say. One such individual was Ilya Kasparov, introduced as a Russian cultural attaché, but who Berg later identified as the SVR resident for Scandinavia, effectively Vetrov's successor in the region. Mikhail spoke highly of you, Kasparov said when they had a moment of privacy. He believed you had potential despite your American upbringing. He was a complicated man, Damon replied carefully. Indeed, and now that his health is failing, certain responsibilities may need new stewards. Kasparov's gaze was evaluative. There are operations he oversaw personally that require particular handling, such as, we'll discuss that in a more appropriate setting. For now, consider this an introduction. Kasparov handed Damon a business card with only a phone number. When you're ready to have a serious conversation about your father's legacy, call this number. As the evening progressed, Damon was introduced to 3 more individuals, a Serbian businessman, a Czech diplomat, and a German banking executive, all part of Vetrov's extended network. Each interaction followed a similar pattern: veiled references to Vetrov, subtle assessments of Damon's potential value, and cautious invitations to further contact. By midnight, when he left the reception, Damon had accomplished his first objective, establishing himself as Vetrov's son and potential heir to his intelligence network. As he walked back toward his hotel through Oslo's quiet streets, he felt a prickling sense of being watched. Turning down a narrow side street, he deliberately slowed his pace. When footsteps quickened behind him, he was ready. In one fluid motion, he spun and caught his follower by surprise, a man in a dark coat who reached inside his jacket too late. Damon slammed him against the brick wall, twisting the man's arm until a small pistol clattered to the pavement. "Who sent you?" Damon demanded in Russian. The man's eyes widened in surprise at the language choice. "Test protocol," he gasped. "Standard procedure for new contacts." "Kasparov." "Berg," he said to apply pressure. "See how you react." Damon released him slightly. "And what will you tell him?" "That you have your father's instincts." And his grip. The man rubbed his wrist ruefully. "Good. Tell him I passed his test, and I don't appreciate being followed. Next time, I won't be so gentle." The encounter, while appearing spontaneous, had been anticipated in Damon's planning. Berg would need to verify his capabilities before any real trust could develop. By demonstrating both awareness and restraint, Damon had passed the first hurdle. Over the next 5 days, Damon moved deeper into Vetrov's world. He met with Berg twice more, each time sharing small pieces of intelligence that Vetrov had provided, enough to prove his connection, but nothing that would compromise American security interests. On the 6th day, his phone rang at 3 a.m. It was Palmer. "Vetrov is dead," he said without preamble. "Past an hour ago." Despite anticipating this news, Damon felt an unexpected complexity of emotions. The man who had destroyed his family, manipulated his life, and yet given him life itself, was gone. "I'll arrange to return for the funeral," Damon said. "There won't be one. Bodies being claimed by the Russian embassy for repatriation." "Understood. I'll be back in D.C. tomorrow." Before he could hang up, Palmer added, "Damon, whatever you're doing in Oslo, be careful. You're walking a fine line." "Always." That morning, Damon received another call, this one from Kasparov. "You've heard the news?" "Yes. There will be a private memorial tonight. Diplomatic residence. 8 p.m. Certain matters regarding succession will be discussed." Kasparov paused. "Your presence would be appropriate." "I'll be there." The Russian diplomatic residence was a 19th-century mansion on the outskirts of Oslo. Security was tight but discreet. men with the unmistakable bearing of intelligence operatives positioned throughout the grounds. Inside, about 30 people had gathered, a mix of official diplomats and others Damon recognized from Vetrov's network. The atmosphere was subdued, but not solemn. This was a professional acknowledgement rather than personal grief. Kasparov led the proceedings, speaking briefly about Vetrov's contributions to Russian intelligence over 5 decades. Then, with practiced diplomatic skill, he separated the gathering into smaller groups. Those with genuine diplomatic credentials drifting toward the formal reception rooms, while a core group of about a dozen were directed to a wood-paneled study. "Gentlemen," Kasparov began once the door was closed. "With Mikhail's passing, certain operational structures require reorganization. He personally managed several high-value assets and operations, particularly legacy networks from the Soviet era." His gaze settled on Damon. "Mr. Thorne's presence here represents both continuity and new opportunity. As Mikhail's son, he has a unique perspective, American by citizenship, but connected to our interests by blood." The implication was clear. Damon was being positioned as a potential bridge between Vetrov's old network and future operations. For the next hour, the conversation navigated complex territory, hints at active operations without explicit details, assessments of Western counterintelligence capabilities, and discussions of financial resources. Damon participated carefully, presenting himself as interested but cautious, knowledgeable but not fully committed. As the meeting concluded, Kasparov took Damon aside. "Mikhail believed you might eventually embrace your heritage. He prepared for that possibility." "How so?" "There's a dacha outside Moscow that belonged to him. In his will, he left it to you, along with certain other personal effects. Items that might help you understand your father better. I'm an American citizen. Travel to Russia might raise flags with my government." Kasparov smiled thinly. "There are ways to manage such concerns. When you're ready to claim your inheritance, contact me." On the flight back to Washington the following day, Damon reviewed his progress. Phase 1 was complete. He had established himself within Vetrov's network as a potential asset, someone they were interested in cultivating. Phase 2 would be more complex and significantly more dangerous. Palmer met him at Dulles Airport, ostensibly as a courtesy, but clearly seeking information. "Productive trip?" he asked as they walked to the parking garage. "Routine business meetings, mostly," Damon replied. "My company's Oslo office is performing well." "And the other business?" Damon stopped walking. "What other business, Agent Palmer?" "Don't play games, Damon. We know you met with Christianberg. We know about the reception at the Russian trade mission. We've been monitoring Vetrov's network for months. Then you know I've done nothing illegal or compromising to national security." Palmer studied him carefully. "What you're doing walks a fine line. If you're playing some kind of double game—" "I'm not playing any game," Damon interrupted. "I'm doing what anyone would do in my position, trying to understand the forces that shape my life. Vetrov approached me. His people are interested in me because of biological coincidence. I'm managing that situation, and you didn't think to coordinate with us? I'm a private citizen, not an intelligence asset. As long as I don't break any laws or compromise national security, my relationships are my business." The tension between them was palpable. Palmer had been both ally and handler during the Ghost Network investigation, but their relationship had evolved into something more complex. Not quite friendship, not quite professional supervision. "Just be careful," Palmer finally said. "These people aren't amateurs. If they sense you're using them—" "I know exactly who they are," Damon replied coldly. "Better than most." Over the next month, Damon maintained regular contact with both Berg and Kasparov through encrypted communications. He shared occasional pieces of non-sensitive information about American defense contractors, the kind of details an insider might provide without crossing into outright espionage. Each exchange built credibility and trust while revealing more about the structure of Vetrov's remaining network. Kasparov, it became clear, was the operational leader. But financial control resided with a figure in Switzerland known only as the accountant, someone who managed the considerable resources Vetrov had accumulated over decades. To truly take your father's place, Berg explained during a secure call. You would need the accountant's backing. He controls the flow of funds to all major operations. How do I meet him? He's coming to Zurich next month. A rare appearance. I could arrange an introduction. Do it. Meanwhile, Damon prepared for the next phase. Using resources only Levi West knew about, he established secure communications with a team of private security contractors, former Special Forces operators who worked outside official channels. He transferred funds from his legitimate business accounts to offshore entities, creating financial flexibility for what was to come. 3 weeks before the planned meeting in Zurich, Damon received intelligence from one of his contacts that changed everything. Elena Petrova had been extracted from witness protection by unknown operatives. Her security detail had been found dead, and she had vanished without a trace. Palmer arrived at Damon's apartment that evening, his expression grim. You've heard that my ex-wife has been kidnapped? Yes, not kidnapped. Our investigation suggests she went willingly. Security cameras show her leaving with the extraction team without resistance. She defected again, Damon concluded. It appears so, but here's what concerns me. The timing. This happens just as you're establishing closer ties with Vetrov's old network. You think I had something to do with it? I think it's one hell of a coincidence. Palmer's gaze was direct. If you know anything, Damon, anything at all, now is the time to share it. I know as much as you do, Damon replied honestly. Elena's extraction hadn't been part of his plan, but it changed the dynamics significantly. If she had indeed returned to Russian intelligence control, she might compromise his position within Vetrov's network. After Palmer left, Damon made a secure call to Berg. I need to know about Elena Petrova. Ah, Berg responded, unsurprised by the question. I wonder when you would ask. Was her extraction ordered by Kasparov? Yes and no. The opportunity presented itself, and he authorized it. But the request came from higher up. Who? Someone who believed she still had value. Someone who thought she belonged back with her own kind. Berg paused. She's in Moscow now. Debriefing. The implications were clear. Elena's return to Russia complicated Damon's plan, but also created new possibilities. If she was in Moscow, and if he accepted Kasparov's invitation to claim Vetrov's dacha, I've been considering Kasparov's offer, Damon said carefully. Regarding my father's property in Russia. An interesting decision, given your position. Perhaps it's time I embraced all aspects of my heritage. After all, blood is blood. Berg's approval was evident in his voice. I'll inform Kasparov. He'll be pleased. Over the next 2 weeks, Damon accelerated his preparations. Through carefully structured transactions, he moved substantial funds to accounts only he could access. He updated his will, leaving control of Thorn Defense Solutions to Levi West. He prepared documents and contingency plans for multiple scenarios. And he waited for Kasparov's invitation to Moscow, the final piece that would set his plan in motion. Chapter 8. Blood and Betrayal. Moscow in November was gray and cold, the city's grand architecture shrouded in early winter fog. Damon's arrival had been managed with quiet efficiency by Kasparov's people. A diplomatic courtesy visa, expedited customs clearance, and a nondescript sedan with tinted windows waiting outside Sheremetyevo Airport. The driver, a taciturn man who introduced himself only as Jaeger, navigated Moscow's congested streets with practiced ease. We go to Vetrov Dacha now, he said in heavily accented English. Is outside city. 1 hour drive. As they left Moscow behind, entering the countryside where Russia's elite maintained their weekend retreats, Damon reviewed his mental map of what was to come. The dacha would be the first stage, a controlled environment where he would be assessed further before being granted access to the inner circle of Vetrov's network. Elena's presence in Moscow created both risk and opportunity. If she had truly defected again, her intimate knowledge of him could expose any inconsistencies in his performance. But if her defection was more complicated, if she had her own agenda, she might become an ally, willing or unwitting. The dacha, when they finally arrived, was surprisingly modest, a traditional wooden structure set amid pine trees, with a small lake visible behind it. Two men with the unmistakable bearing of security personnel stood near the entrance, watching their arrival with professional interest. "Welcome to your inheritance, Mr. Thorne," said a familiar voice as Damon exited the car. Ilya Kasparov approached from the house, extending his hand. Mikhail's little piece of traditional Russia. Inside, the dacha was warm and unexpectedly homey. Wooden walls decorated with traditional textiles, comfortable furniture arranged around a ceramic stove, and shelves lined with books in multiple languages. It was difficult to imagine Vetrov, the cold, calculating spymaster, relaxing in such surroundings. "He came here to remember his roots," Kasparov explained, noting Damon's surprise. "In our profession, it's easy to lose sight of what we're fighting for." This place was his anchor to the Russia he believed in, not just the Russia he served. When did he acquire it? 1986. It was a reward for a particularly successful operation in your country. Kasparov studied Damon's reaction. "Does that bother you? That your father worked against American interests?" "He made his choices," Damon replied carefully. "As I've made mine." "And what choice brings Damon Thorne, successful American defense contractor, to Russia to claim a dead spy's dacha?" The question was delivered lightly, but carried unmistakable weight. Curiosity, connection, perhaps a desire to understand the other half of my heritage. Kasparov seemed satisfied with the answer. "There are documents in the study, personal papers, photographs, things Mikhail wanted you to have. I'll leave you to explore while I arrange our dinner." Alone in Vetrov's study, Damon examined the collection of personal effects with genuine interest. Photographs spanning decades showed Vetrov in various settings, some obviously operational, others surprisingly personal. One image caught Damon's attention. Vetrov with a young woman who bore a striking resemblance to his mother, Eleanor, standing in front of what appeared to be the National Mall in Washington, D.C. In a locked drawer, opened with a key Kasparov had provided, Damon found a journal written in Vetrov's precise handwriting. Most entries were in Russian, but some switched to English, particularly when discussing operations in the United States. Damon found an entry dated 9 months before his birth, a brief note about and a decision that personal entanglements compromise operational security. Had Vetrov genuinely cared for his mother? Or had she simply been an operational target who became inconveniently pregnant? The journal offered no clear answers, only hints at a complex history. More practically useful was a small address book containing contacts across Europe and Asia. Names, locations, and cryptic notations that likely indicated operational roles. Damon memorized key entries, recognizing some as figures still active in Vetrov's network. Dinner was served in the dacha's small dining room. Traditional Russian cuisine prepared by a cook who Damon suspected doubled as security personnel. Kasparov was joined by 2 other men introduced as Orlov and Barsukov, both with the unmistakable bearing of intelligence officers despite their civilian attire. "We've been reviewing your interactions with Berg and Oslo," Orlov said as they ate. "He speaks highly of your adaptability. Professional flexibility has served me well in business," Damon replied. "And now?" Barsukov asked. "How does Damon Thorne balance his American business interests with his newfound Russian connections?" The question was the first direct probe of his intentions, a test of his cover story and commitment. "I've reached a point in my life where financial success alone feels hollow," Damon said, the practiced response flowing naturally. "My father's death forced me to confront questions about identity and legacy. What does it mean to be half Russian, raised American, son of a man who served interests opposed to my country?" He paused, letting the personal struggle seem genuine. "I'm not here to betray America, but I am interested in understanding this part of my heritage, and perhaps finding a middle path that honors both sides of my blood." Kasparov nodded approvingly. A thoughtful response, and practical too. Your position in the American defense sector makes you valuable regardless of your level of active cooperation. The conversation continued through dinner, ranging from innocent discussions of Moscow's history to more pointed questions about Damon's access to classified American defense information. He navigated each probe carefully, showing enough willingness to share non-sensitive information to maintain credibility while avoiding anything that would constitute actual espionage. After dinner, when Orlov and Barsukov had departed, Kasparov remained, sipping vodka by the fireplace. "There's someone else who wants to see you," he said casually. "Someone who knows you quite well." Before Damon could respond, the door opened, and Elena entered. She looked different than when he'd last seen her in custody. Her hair was longer, her posture more confident, but her eyes held a wariness that hadn't been there before. "Hello, Damon," she said in her natural Russian accent. "I'll leave you two to reconnect," Kasparov said, rising. "Elena knows the dacha well. She can show you to your room when you're ready to retire." When they were alone, Damon and Elena regarded each other in silence for a long moment. "So you've returned to the fold," Damon finally said. "And you've discovered your Russian heritage," she countered. "We're both full of surprises. Why did you leave witness protection? You had a new identity, a fresh start." "Because it was a cage, just a different kind." Elena moved to the window, looking out at the darkness. "I spent 8 years pretending to be someone else for my country. Then they wanted me to spend the rest of my life pretending to be yet another person for yours. So loyalty to Russia brought you back. Not loyalty, reality." She turned to face him. "I am Russian, Damon. Elena Petrova is who I am, not a cover identity. Vivian Thorne was the fiction. And now what? You resume your career in intelligence." "That remains to be seen." She studied him with professional assessment. "The more interesting question is what you're doing here. Kasparov believes you're following in your father's footsteps, embracing your Russian blood. I know you better than that." Damon met her gaze steadily. "Do you? 8 years, Damon. Cover identity or not, I know who you are. And this," she gestured around them, "this is not you. People change. Finding out your entire life was built on lies tends to have that effect." Elena moved closer, her voice dropping. "If you're playing some kind of game with these people, stop now. They'll see through it eventually. And when they do, you'll disappear. Vetrov's son or not, they won't tolerate deception." Interesting advice from a professional deceiver. Her expression hardened. "Take it however you want. But remember, these aren't criminals you can outsmart or bureaucrats you can manipulate. These are professionals who've survived decades in a world where the slightest mistake means death." "Thank you for your concern," Damon replied coolly. "Now, I believe you were going to show me to my room." The bedroom was simple but comfortable, with windows overlooking the lake. Elena left him at the door without further conversation. Once alone, Damon conducted a thorough sweep for surveillance devices, finding 2, one in a light fixture, another behind a heating vent. He left them in place. Removing them would only confirm suspicion. His inspection complete, Damon prepared for bed with the careful routine of someone aware they were being watched. Only when the lights were out, lying in the darkness, did he allow himself to review the day's developments. Elena's presence complicated matters. Her warning suggested she might suspect his true intentions. A risk, but potentially useful if managed carefully. The key question was whether her return to Russia was genuine or another layer of deception. In the morning, Kasparov arrived early, announcing that they would be traveling to Moscow. "There are people eager to meet Mikhail Vetrov's son," he explained. "People who control resources your father managed." The drive to Moscow took them to a nondescript office building in the city center. Inside, past layers of security, was a modern operations center, computer workstations, secure communications equipment, and a conference room where 3 individuals waited. Our financial strategist, Anton Volkov, Kasparov, introduced a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses. Our technical director, Dr. Irina Sokolova. A severe-looking woman in her 50s nodded curtly. And our operations coordinator, Colonel Dmitry Yakovlev. The third individual, a broad-shouldered man in civilian clothes, studied Damon with open skepticism. For the next 4 hours, Damon was subjected to a comprehensive evaluation. Questions about his technical knowledge, his access to American defense systems, his understanding of intelligence tradecraft. It was not an interrogation, but a professional assessment of his potential value. "Your father believed you could be an asset," Yakovlev said bluntly. I remain unconvinced. I'm not here asking for your approval, Colonel, Damon replied evenly. I'm here to understand my father's world. Whether I become part of it is my decision, not yours. Yakovlev's eyes narrowed, but Volkov intervened. Perhaps a demonstration of good faith would help establish trust on both sides. What did you have in mind? Damon asked. Your company, Thorn Defense Solutions, recently secured a contract to upgrade security protocols for several American military installations, Sokolova said. The encryption standards specified in that contract would be of interest. It was a test, a request for classified information that would constitute clear espionage, if provided. Damon had prepared for this moment, constructing a response that would maintain his cover without crossing irreversible lines. I can provide an analysis of the contract requirements without sharing proprietary details, he offered. Enough for you to understand the direction of American security thinking without compromising specific implementations. Sokolova and Volkov exchanged glances. Acceptable, for now, Volkov said. There's another matter, Kasparov interjected. The Zurich meeting. The accountant has agreed to meet with you next week. Who exactly is this accountant? Damon asked. The financial architect of your father's independent operations, Volkov explained. Vetrov maintained resources separate from official channels. Investments, accounts, properties. The accountant manages these assets, which are considerable, and my father left instructions regarding these assets. He designated you as his heir, conditional upon the accountant's approval. It's a position of significant influence within our network. The implication was clear. Vetrov had created a path for Damon to inherit not just his personal wealth, but his position within the shadow network he had built, a network that operated with autonomy from official Russian intelligence structures. That evening, back at the dacha, Damon found Elena waiting in the study. How was your evaluation? She asked. Thorough. They're deciding whether to trust you with real, operational information. Elena poured 2 glasses of vodka, offering one to Damon. Kasparov is inclined to believe you're genuine. Yakovlev thinks you're playing a double game. And you? Elena sipped her vodka before answering. I think you're here for something specific. Not intelligence gathering. Not some existential quest about your heritage. Something personal. Damon neither confirmed nor denied her assessment. Why are you telling me this? Because whatever game you're playing, you're in over your head. She moved closer, lowering her voice despite the surveillance she surely knew was present. These people killed your father, your real father, Richard Thorne. They destroyed your mother's life. They sent me to deceive you for 8 years. If you're here for some kind of justice or revenge, you won't find it. You'll only find your own destruction. That sounds like concern, Elena. I wouldn't have expected that from you. Not concern. Reality. She finished her vodka. Our marriage was built on lies, but not everything was false. Remember that when whatever you're planning comes to a head. She left him alone in the study, her warning hanging in the air between them. Damon considered her words carefully. Was she trying to protect him, manipulate him, or simply positioning herself to survive whatever came next? The following days established a pattern. Mornings at the Moscow Operations Center, being briefed on selected activities of Vetrov's network. Afternoons at the dacha, reviewing his father's personal archives. Evenings of careful conversation with Kasparov and, occasionally, Elena. Each interaction a delicate dance of half-truths and calculated revelations. On the 5th day, Kasparov announced it was time to prepare for Zurich. The accountant has agreed to meet you tomorrow. This is unusual. He rarely meets directly with operational personnel. What exactly does he expect from me? Verification. Commitment. A demonstration that you're truly Vetrov's son and more than blood. Kasparov handed Damon a folder. Your travel documents. Commercial flight, diplomatic passport. Elena will accompany you. Is that necessary? The accountant requested her presence. They have history. The flight to Zurich passed in tense silence between Damon and Elena. Only when they were in their hotel suite, another environment certainly monitored, did she speak freely. The accountant was Vetrov's closest ally for decades, she explained. They met during the Prague Spring in 1968. He's not Russian. He's Czech originally. Brilliant financial mind who saw the Soviet system's flaws early and helped Vetrov establish independent resources. Independent from what? From the KGB, initially. Later, from the SVR and FSB. Vetrov believed in Russian interests, but not always in Russian leadership. He built a network that could operate regardless of who controlled the Kremlin. A private intelligence organization, Damon concluded. A pragmatic one, sometimes aligned with official policy, sometimes pursuing its own objectives. Elena's expression turned serious. He won't be easy to deceive, Damon. Whatever you're planning, reconsider. The meeting was scheduled for noon at a private banking facility in Zurich's financial district. Damon dressed carefully in a tailored suit, projecting the confidence of someone comfortable in the world of high finance and clandestine operations. The bank itself was unmarked, its entrance discreet, its security subtle but comprehensive. They were escorted to a conference room on the top floor, where a single figure waited. An elderly man with alert eyes and a posture that suggested vitality despite his years. "Mikhail's son," he said in perfect English, rising to greet them. "I see the resemblance. I'm Joseph Novak, though you know me by another title." The accountant, Damon, acknowledged. "My father spoke of you." And Elena, Novak continued, his tone cooling. "I was surprised to learn of your return to the fold. Your defection caused considerable disruption." "Circumstances changed," she replied simply. Novak gestured for them to sit. "I've reviewed your file, Mr. Thorne. Impressive in its way, building a defense contracting business, securing classified contracts, all while unaware of your true heritage. Your father believed this position would eventually prove valuable, though he never intended for you to learn the truth as you did." "And now," Damon asked, "now we determine whether Mikhail's confidence in you is justified." Novak opened a leather portfolio. "Your father established certain protocols for this eventuality. Tests of commitment, of capability." "What kind of tests?" "3 tasks. Complete them successfully, and you inherit not just Mikhail's personal assets, but his position within our organization. Fail, and you return to America with nothing but memories of a father you never truly knew." The first task was straightforward but significant, using Damon's company to bid on a specific defense contract that would provide access to a secure facility in Virginia. The second required him to establish contact with a dormant asset in the Pentagon, a senior official who had been inactive since the Cold War, but remained strategically placed. It was the third task that revealed the true nature of the test. "There is an individual who possesses information dangerous to our network," Novak explained. "A former SVR officer named Viktor Baranov, currently living under CIA protection in Connecticut. He must be eliminated." "You're asking me to commit murder on American soil," Damon stated flatly. "I'm asking you to demonstrate the same commitment to operational security that your father consistently showed." Novak's gaze was unflinching. Mikhail once eliminated a childhood friend who threatened to expose his true identity. That level of dedication is what built this organization. "And if I refuse, then you're not your father's son in the ways that matter. You return to America, we continue our separate paths, and this meeting never happened." Elena remained silent throughout the exchange, but Damon caught the tension in her posture. This was the moment of truth, the point at which his performance would either secure his position or expose his deception. "I'll need operational support," Damon said after a calculated pause. "This isn't the kind of task one undertakes alone." Novak nodded approvingly. "Resources will be provided. Elena will be your handler for this operation, with direct reporting to me." After the meeting, in a public park chosen to minimize surveillance, Damon and Elena spoke more freely. "You can't seriously be considering this," she said, her voice low but intense. "They're asking you to assassinate a protected witness. It's a suicide mission." "It's a test of loyalty," Damon corrected. "One I need to appear to accept while finding a way to manage the situation." "There is no managing this situation. Either you kill Baranov, or you expose whatever game you're playing." Elena studied him intently. "What are you really doing here, Damon?" This isn't about heritage or curiosity or even revenge. What's your endgame? For the first time, Damon considered whether Elena might be a potential ally rather than an obstacle. Her return to Russian intelligence remained suspect, a convenient defection that seemed too perfectly timed. What's yours? He countered. You could have disappeared with a new identity after witness protection. Instead, you returned to the people who used you for decades. Why? Something flickered in Elena's eyes, a moment of genuine emotion breaking through her professional facade. Because there are things I need to finish, people I need to face. Vetrov, he was dead before I could confront him. But there are others. People who gave the orders, who created the program that turned children into weapons. The revelation was unexpected, a glimpse of Elena's true motivation that matched nothing in her known psychological profile. She had been assessed as a committed operative, ideologically aligned with Russian interests. This suggested something far more personal. You returned for revenge, Damon realized. I returned to face the truth, she corrected. Something you might understand. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Kasparov, who had been monitoring from a distance. Your meeting with the accountant went well, he observed. He believes you have potential. The tasks he's set are significant, Damon replied carefully, but necessary, particularly the matter of Baranov. Kasparov's expression hardened. His cooperation with American intelligence has compromised several operations. This isn't just a test for you. It's a priority for our security. Back in their hotel, Damon began planning his approach to the Baranov operation, not with the intention of carrying it out, but to maintain his cover while advancing his true objective. Each task Novak had assigned would draw him deeper into Vetrov's network, providing access to the information and individuals he actually sought. That night, as Damon worked, Elena entered his room without knocking. Without speaking, she turned on the shower in the adjacent bathroom, creating white noise to defeat potential listening devices. Whatever you're planning, I want in, she whispered, standing close enough that her words wouldn't carry beyond the bathroom door. Damon studied her face, looking for deception. Why would I trust you? Because I know the truth about Vetrov's operation, the parts even Kasparov doesn't know. Because I have access you'll never get on your own. Her eyes locked with his. And because I have my own scores to settle. What scores? Vetrov didn't just recruit me. He designed my entire life. My parents were his assets. My education, my training, my assignments, all orchestrated by him. I was property, not a person. Something raw flashed in her eyes. When I learned you were his son, I realized I'd been manipulated even more completely than I knew. So this is about revenge. Justice, she corrected. For both of us. Damon considered her offer carefully. Elena was a trained operative. Deception was her profession. Yet her anger seemed genuine, and her knowledge of Vetrov's network would be invaluable. If this is another manipulation, he said finally, I'll make sure you regret it. Fair enough. She moved away from the bathroom. We should return to Moscow tomorrow. Novak will expect progress reports on your tasks. The next morning, they flew back to Moscow, maintaining their covers as Damon considered Elena's proposition. If she was genuine, she could be a crucial ally. If not, she could destroy everything he'd worked for. In Moscow, preparations for the Baranov operation proceeded. Kasparov provided intelligence on the target's location and security arrangements. Resources were allocated. A timeline was established. Through it all, Damon played his role perfectly. The son embracing his father's legacy, ready to prove himself with blood. At the dacha that evening, Elena sought him out again, this time guiding him to walk by the lake, away from surveillance. Baranov is a trap, she said without preamble. He's been moved 3 times in the past month. They know someone's coming. You're certain? I have contact in the SVR who still trust me. The CIA has enhanced his security significantly. Whoever goes after him is walking into an ambush. So Novak is sending me to be captured or killed, Damon concluded, or testing your ability to recognize a suicide mission. Either way, you can't proceed as planned. I never intended to. Damon stopped walking, facing her directly. What's your real agenda, Elena? Why come back to Russia only to betray Vetrov's organization? She met his gaze unflinchingly. Because Vetrov destroyed both our lives and his network continues his work. Because the people who turned me into a weapon deserve justice. And because she hesitated, because despite everything, I owe you that much. It was as close to an apology as Elena Petrova was capable of offering, an acknowledgement of the debt created by 8 years of deception. Tomorrow, Damon said, we're going to modify our approach to Novak's tasks. I need access to financial records, specifically the accounts Vetrov maintained outside official channels. The accountant controls those directly. Then we need leverage to make him cooperate. Elena's lips curved in a cold smile. I might know where to find some. Chapter 9, Blood Justice. The private bank in Geneva was discreet to the point of invisibility. No name on the building, no indication of its purpose beyond the understated security and immaculate interior. Damon entered alone, Elena having orchestrated a diversion to occupy Kasparov's attention in Moscow. I have an appointment with Mr. Reichman, Damon told the receptionist, using the code phrase Elena had provided. Minutes later, he was escorted to a private office where an elderly gentleman awaited him. Mr. Thorne, the man greeted him. I understand you're interested in certain historical accounts, specifically those established by Mikhail Vetrov between 1975 and 1990. The banker's expression remained neutral. Those records would require significant authorization. Damon placed a small flash drive on the desk. I believe this constitutes the necessary authorization. The drive contained what Elena had described as her insurance policy. Encrypted files she had extracted during her time with American intelligence, detailing compromising connections between the banker and Vetrov's illegal operations. Elena had kept this leverage hidden from both sides, anticipating a day when she might need independent leverage. After examining the files, the banker's demeanor changed subtly. What specifically are you looking for, Mr. Thorne? Complete transaction histories, offshore transfers, and most importantly, the identity of all beneficiaries. For the next 3 hours, Damon reviewed decades of financial records, tracing the complex web of Vetrov's personal empire. What emerged was more significant than he had anticipated. Not just accounts and properties, but a network of corporations and foundations controlling billions in assets, all managed through the accountant's elaborate structure. Most importantly, he found what he was truly seeking: proof that Vetrov's organization had been systematically eliminating threats to its existence for decades. Not just Richard Thorne, but dozens of individuals who had come too close to the truth: intelligence officers, journalists, even Russian officials who threatened their autonomy. Each death was documented in cold financial terms: payments to operatives, expense accounts for cleanup, and asset transfers to compensate cooperative officials. The organization functioned as a state within states, serving Russian interests when convenient, but ultimately loyal only to itself. When Damon returned to Moscow the following day, he found Elena waiting at the dacha with news. Kasparov is suspicious. He's ordered increased surveillance on both of us. How much time do we have? Days at most. He scheduled a meeting with the accountant to discuss your progress on the tasks. She studied his expression. You found what you were looking for in Geneva. And more. Damon handed her a secure tablet containing selected files from his research. This isn't just about my father's murder or our personal grievances. Vetrov built something that outlived him. A permanent shadow organization that's killed dozens and corrupted officials across multiple governments. Elena reviewed the files, her expression hardening. So what's your plan? Systematic destruction, Damon replied coldly. Not just exposure. That would only drive them deeper underground. I'm going to dismantle Vetrov's legacy piece by piece, starting with the accountant. How? By giving them exactly what they expect. Vetrov's son following in his father's footsteps. Over the next 48 hours, Damon activated the network he had been quietly building for months. Using secure communications routed through Thorne Defense Solutions' encrypted channels, he coordinated with Levi West and a team of former Special Forces operators now positioned throughout Europe. Simultaneously, he prepared his approach to Novak, crafting a report on the Baranov operation that would satisfy the accountant's expectations while buying critical time. Elena provided intelligence on surveillance and security protocols, enabling Damon to move pieces into position without detection. The meeting with Novak was scheduled for a secure location in Berlin, neutral ground where the accountant occasionally conducted sensitive business. Damon arrived with Elena, presenting a carefully constructed operational plan for the Baranov assassination that addressed the security concerns while proposing a viable approach. Impressive work, Novak acknowledged after reviewing the plan. Mikhail would approve of your thoroughness. I'm not interested in my father's approval, Damon replied. I'm interested in his legacy, specifically the financial infrastructure he built. Novak's eyes narrowed slightly. That goes beyond the scope of our current arrangement. Financial access comes after you've completed all 3 tasks. I'm accelerating the timeline, Damon said calmly. I've already made contact with the Pentagon asset, your second task, and I've developed a more efficient approach to Baranov. But I need additional resources to execute effectively. What resources? Access to the operational accounts Vetrov established in Liechtenstein, the ones separate from the organization's main finances. The request was precisely calculated, specific enough to demonstrate insider knowledge, but not so broad as to trigger Novak's suspicions. Elena had confirmed these accounts existed but were rarely accessed, making them a plausible target for Damon's request. Those accounts have special protocols, Novak said carefully. Vetrov established them for contingencies. Exactly why I need them. Baranov's security is substantial. This operation requires a contingency fund for rapid response if complications arise. Novak considered this, then nodded slowly. A limited access authorization could be arranged. Temporary, of course. Of course. As they left the meeting, Elena maintained professional composure until they reached the privacy of their hotel suite. He's suspicious, she said immediately. He'll verify your claims about the Pentagon asset. I'm counting on it, Damon replied. I've arranged for his verification channels to receive confirmation. By the time he realizes it's fabricated, we'll be ready to move. When? Tomorrow night. The accountant is scheduled to return to Zurich. We intercept him en route. Elena's expression showed a mix of admiration and concern. Kasparov will have security with him. Already accounted for. Damon activated a secure tablet, displaying the operational plan he'd developed with Levi West. 4 extraction points, redundant escape routes, and a safe house outside Munich where we'll have 12 hours of complete isolation with Novak. To what end? To get what we really need. Complete access to Vetrov's financial network and confirmation of every individual involved in his organization, from operations to governance. That night, as final preparations were made, Elena came to Damon's room. Unlike their previous strategic conversations, her approach was different, more personal, almost vulnerable. If this works, she said quietly, what happens afterward? To us. There is no us, Elena, Damon replied coldly. We're temporary allies with aligned interests. Once this is done, we go our separate ways. Just like that? After everything, he confirmed. 8 years of marriage based on lies isn't erased by a few days of cooperation. She nodded, accepting his position. For what it's worth, not everything was a lie. The person you knew, parts of her were real. The only real parts of me I was allowed to show. It doesn't matter now. No, she agreed sadly. I suppose it doesn't. The operation against Novak proceeded with military precision. The accountant security detail was neutralized by Damon's team as his convoy traveled from Berlin to the private airfield where his jet waited. The extraction itself took less than 90 seconds, a precisely executed ambush that left no witnesses and no trail. At the safe house, a converted farmhouse in the Bavarian countryside, Novak found himself secured to a chair facing Damon and Elena. This is disappointing, Novak said calmly, displaying the composure of someone who had prepared for such contingencies. Mikhail would be ashamed. My father, My real father was Richard Thorne, Damon replied. And you helped Vetrov have him killed. Business, Novak said simply. He was threatening operations worth billions. And now I'm threatening your entire organization. The difference is, I'm not here to expose you. I'm here to take control. Novak's expression shifted from resignation to interest. Take control. Vetrov built something extraordinary, a private intelligence network with financial independence and operational autonomy. I want access to all of it: accounts, operational protocols, personnel files. Everything. To what end? To continue the work, but under my direction. Damon leaned forward. Vetrov was right about one thing. Blood tells. I have his instinct for this game, but my own vision for how to play it. It was a calculated approach, presenting himself not as an avenging son, but as a worthy successor seeking to claim his inheritance by force rather than permission. The scenario would appeal to Novak's pragmatic nature while playing to his understanding of power dynamics. And if I refuse? Novak asked. Damon gestured to Elena, who opened a laptop displaying selected files from the Geneva Bank. Then these files go to intelligence agencies in 7 countries. Your network collapses, assets are seized, and operatives are exposed. You spend your remaining years in prison, assuming your former clients don't decide to eliminate the liability you represent. For hours, Novak resisted, probing for weaknesses in Damon's position, testing his resolve and knowledge. Elena remained mostly silent, observing the psychological battle between two methodical minds. Finally, as dawn approached, Novak made his decision. What you're asking requires more than just my cooperation. The organization has layers of security, redundant systems, which is why you're going to provide complete access and then help implement the transition. Damon's voice was calm but implacable. You built this system for Vetrov. Now you'll help rebuild it for me. Over the next 24 hours, Novak provided access to the intricate financial infrastructure he had created: digital keys, account numbers, authentication protocols, and most crucially, the complete organizational structure of Vetrov's network. Names, locations, responsibilities, the entire shadow empire laid bare. What Novak didn't know was that each piece of information was being simultaneously transmitted to a secure server where Levi West coordinated with trusted contacts in multiple intelligence agencies, not to expose the network immediately, but to position assets for synchronized action. When Damon had what he needed, he faced a final decision regarding Novak himself. The practical choice would be elimination. The man knew too much and could never be trusted. It was what Vetrov would have done, what the accountant himself would recommend from a security perspective. Instead, Damon implemented a different approach. Using the legal infrastructure Novak had created, he executed documents transferring significant assets to the families of Vetrov's victims. Anonymous payments appearing as inheritances from long-forgotten relatives or investments maturing after decades. "What are you doing?" Novak asked, watching as billions in assets were systematically redirected. "Justice," Damon replied simply. "Not revenge. Justice." For Richard Thorne's death, he arranged for $50 million to be transferred to a foundation supporting children of intelligence officers killed in the line of duty. For his mother's decades of grief, he funded research into dementia treatment. For each documented victim of Vetrov's organization, he created a measure of compensation that could never replace lives, but might bring some healing. When the transfers were complete, Damon turned to Novak. "You're not going to prison, and I'm not going to kill you. Neither would be adequate punishment. Then what? You're going to live in obscurity with just enough resources to survive, but not enough to ever rebuild. You'll watch as everything you created is dismantled, and you'll know it was Vetrov's own blood that brought it down." 48 hours later, as intelligence agencies across Europe and America moved simultaneously against Vetrov's network, Damon met Elena at a safe house in Switzerland. The coordinated operation had resulted in dozens of arrests, seized assets worth billions, and the complete exposure of a shadow organization decades in the making. "It's done," he told her, handing her a secure phone. "Your new identity and resources are arranged. Enough to disappear completely, Start over anywhere. Elena took the phone, her expression unreadable. So this is goodbye. This is justice, Damon corrected. For both of us. And Kasparov, currently being interviewed by Interpol regarding his role in at least 15 documented assassinations. Elena nodded slowly. What will you do now? Rebuild. Not just my company, but my life. Damon's expression remained hard. Without looking back. I understand. She hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, I am sorry, Damon. Not just for the deception, but for believing in it for so long. Damon studied her face. The woman he had once believed was his wife, now revealed as both victim and perpetrator of an elaborate deception spanning generations. In another life, perhaps forgiveness might have been possible. In this one, the damage was too profound, the betrayal too complete. Goodbye, Elena, he said simply, turning to leave. He didn't look back, didn't witness her reaction. Some chapters needed to end cleanly, without the complication of lingering emotions or false closure. 6 months later, Damon stood on the balcony of his new home in Santa Barbara, watching the Pacific sunset. Thorn Defense Solutions had been restructured, focusing now on identifying and countering foreign influence operations, work that built on his personal experience while serving a genuine security need. Levi West joined him, handing him a glass of bourbon. Latest reports from our contacts, he said. The last of Vetrov's operators in South America have been contained. That's the final cell. And Novak, living in a small apartment in Prague, working as a bookkeeper for a grocery chain. Exactly as you arranged. Damon nodded, satisfied. The Justice operation, as it had been quietly named within intelligence circles, had systematically dismantled a network that had existed in shadows for nearly 50 years. Not through public exposure or criminal prosecution alone, but through a carefully orchestrated combination of targeted intelligence actions, financial disarmament, and strategic realignment of resources. Any word on Elena? Levi asked cautiously. None, Damon replied. And I haven't looked. The truth was more complex. Elena had disappeared using the resources he'd provided, creating a new identity beyond the reach of both Russian and American intelligence. Whether she was seeking redemption, building a new life, or planning her own form of justice was her choice now. One of the few truly free choices in a life largely controlled by others. As for Damon himself, the revelation of his biological connection to Vetrov had forced him to confront difficult questions about identity and inheritance. But in the end, he had proven that blood was not destiny. Richard Thorn, the man who had raised him, loved him, and died protecting him, was his true father. That legacy of principle over expedience, justice over revenge, had guided his response to Vetrov's world. He had entered that world, mastered its rules, and then broken them. Not with the brutality Vetrov would have employed, but with a calculated justice that systematically unraveled decades of deception and corruption. Some might call it revenge, but Damon knew the difference. Revenge sought personal satisfaction. Justice sought restoration of balance, payment of debts owed, acknowledgement of wrongs committed. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. Damon raised his glass slightly, a private toast to the parents who had shaped him, one through presence, one through absence, and one through blood. He had survived their legacy, confronted their ghosts, and emerged not unmarked but unbowed. The future remained unwritten, shaped not by the blood in his veins, but by the choices he would make. Choices that were, at last, entirely his own. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.